in my heart. And I haven't always lived up to the extremes of that. I haven't always been perfect in that aspect, but I've always tried. And so that tells you a little bit about who I am, or at least my ideals. So some of the things that we are talking about, obviously freedom is our biggest thing. And here in America, we recognize that we have more freedom than anywhere else in the world has ever had throughout pretty much all of time. I think we also understand that today that's under attack at a greater level than it's ever been. And so we want to combat that attack. The question is, do we combat it by worrying about it, or do we combat it by changing it? And I believe the way we do that is to change it. And the way that we change it is to change the way we think about the problem and about ourselves. So I'm not here to tell you, you have to change everything about yourself. There were some things I needed to fix in order to be a better freedom fighter. So, to recognize the problem, in our company they have a book of the month, and one of those books, this month's book, is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Now, some of you may have heard of Viktor Frankl before. He was in a prison camp, not a prison camp, a concentration camp, during World War II. He was a doctor, and he was held there almost to death, and then he was freed. And after a number of years, he wrote this book, discussing how he made it through and the dedication he had to have just to survive. And survival, for many of us, is the first key to freedom. Without it, I would argue, you don't have much freedom. And so he talks about some other steps. But when I think of bondage, I think of two real societies. They happen to be the same society, at least by lineage. We have the people during World War II, primarily the Jews. A number of other people were imprisoned as well. But they were imprisoned, and their identity was taken away from them. Now we can go back further, and that same group of people, ancestrally, they were held by the Egyptians solely for being there and for being good at what they did. They were then enslaved by the Egyptians. Now, in the case of their escape from the Egyptians, they complained about every difficulty in getting away and getting out of bondage. All they did was complain, it seemed. Oh, Moses, why do we have to eat this kind of food that's provided for us free every day from God? I don't understand the complaint, but I didn't have to eat manna the whole time either. So when they complained enough and Moses asked God to relieve them, he gave them more than enough birds that they could ever deal with. So they went back to manna because they were happy about it now. But to understand that they saw their challenges in escaping slavery, in escaping bondage, they saw their challenges as greater than the bondage itself. And many times what we face today, and I know that we're in a bastion of thinking for freedom. I understand that. I'm proud to be among you because of that. So I know that some of you have stood for freedom in a very real way, and I won't take away from that at all. But they complained about the efforts it took. We have people today who will complain about the efforts to get out of bondage. Now, today's biggest bondage is probably financial, for most people. Not for everyone, but for most of society. The greatest bondage we face. However, that's why we have political bondage. It's why we are losing some of our religious freedom. Because of, everyone is indebted to society, or to a bank, or to the government, or to something. We're relying on others. I'll get on my quote. A man counted only because he had a prison number. One literally became a number. Dead or alive, that was unimportant. The life of a number was completely irrelevant. What stood behind that number and that life mattered even less. The fate, the history, the name of the man. In the transport of sick patients that I, in my capacity as a doctor, had to accompany from one camp in Bavaria to another, there was a young prisoner whose brother was not on the list, and therefore would have to be left behind. The young man begged so long that the camp warden decided to work an exchange, and the brother took the place of a man who, at the moment, preferred to stay behind. But the list had to be correct. The number had to be correct. That was easy. The brother just exchanged numbers with the other prisoner.